I'm Ginger Bowler. This webinar is on forgiveness. Is forgiveness necessary? Is it optional in healing, in health, in happiness? Many of us practitioners of the healing art really, or all of us, I would say, if we're in the healing arts in some way, we want to help those people who come to us. We want to be able to help our friends and family. And we might have amazing equipment like biofeedback devices, the quantum biofeedback devices that I'm actually going to be using to show how I would work with the issue of forgiveness on biofeedback. That's going to be part one. Part two. This is part one of the webinar, the setup for my philosophy on forgiveness and bringing in some other people's philosophies on forgiveness. But the question is it necessary? Is it, or do we just sort of jump over that when someone and work strictly on the physical body? And of course, in my world, in my universe, I said, nope. No, and in the healing arts, we pretty much know it's mind, body, spirit, soul, our social life, our financial life, our everything is connected, and we can't jump over that. So forgiveness, whether we're the one that needs to be forgiven or we're the one that needs to forgive, is absolutely something that will either keep us stuck or set us free. The lack of forgiveness will keep us stuck. The forgiveness itself will set us free. So because I was asked to do this webinar for the biofeedback industry, I'm just showing a picture right now of one of the devices. This is a Quest 9. But those of you all who would be watching this, you're either a practitioner already, you're thinking about becoming a practitioner, and you're looking at some device, whether that's similar or first cousins to Quest 9. And that's my language, okay? I'm not the manufacturer or whatever. I've simply used the different versions of the software that you're going to be seeing in part two. And some of you looking at this webinar actually may be, like I said, you may be thinking about just being a client of someone, or you may to have some sessions, or maybe thinking about getting a device, or like I said, you already have one. So that might have been the EPFX, the QXCI, the Skio, the Indigo, the eDoctor, or the Quest 9, and maybe I'm forgetting even a couple of the names. I'm not sure. But anyway, I think this information is still going to be relevant even if you're not a biofeedback user, practitioner, whatever. So I hope so. So I asked my clients who cannot seem to heal or stay well these questions because I've noticed that over the years, if someone can't get well or they can't seem to stay well once they get well, it's usually fundamentally deep underneath the stress that they're dealing with is that they think they've done something that is completely unforgivable and usually unforgivable by God. Sometimes they feel like, it's their child who's cannot forgive them, their spouse or former spouse or friend or sibling. But I would say in all these decades of working with people, for me, it usually boils down to they think it's God that can't forgive them. But sometimes it's that they are the one that refuse to forgive. And we have to deal with that. Now, a lot of times what will happen, of course, is that friends and family will agree. So go into alignment with you that you have every right not to forgive. And there's a lot of evidence out in the universe, that out there in the world, that, yep, you are right. You have every right to being mad. You have every right to staying mad. You do. So do I. That's our option. It just doesn't set us free. It just doesn't take us to where we want to go. So yeah, it's true. We have the right. We even have all our reasons. And they may be great, but they keep us stuck and they keep us sick. So in the beginning of a session, if someone's coming to me for a session, they pretty much have an understanding that I have great love and a belief in a higher power. And I use the name of God. But I don't want my customer to feel uncomfortable because each person relates to God differently. So I want to get their permission to talk about their relationship with that divine source and use the name that they feel comfortable with. If they're comfortable, talking about Jesus, and Jesus was the greatest healer of all times, and all the ways that we've seen evidence, in all the stories of his healing and the miracles, and how he told us that he raises Lazarus from the dead and then says, oh, greater things than you think that's good, great, you're going to do better, greater things than this are you going to do in my name. If they're comfortable with that conversation, I'm going for it on that conversation. But a lot of people are not. The language is different, and we want to work with the language. So I will be working in the NLP program and the way that they language things. So, so we have this conversation. In all these years, I have never worked with someone that we found out that this is an issue that they think God can't forgive them for something. I've never worked with someone who didn't believe in some higher power. They just may use a different name. So I want to get to that name. Now, this is my own personal philosophy, and some people might say, oh, well, that's wrong and whatever. Well, that's your opinion. So you keep what works for you out of this webinar, and keep what works and let the rest go. I don't mean to offend anybody's spiritual or religious belief. But I learned this lesson from my friend Kay. Kay, precious friend of mine, many years ago, called me, and I've been teaching in the field of energy medicine and natural healing for 33 years now, having had the greatest teacher in the world, I think, Hannah Kroger, teaching quantum biofeedback, teaching Hannah Kroger's work, biogenesis, biofeedback, etc. Anything that helps a person have a better life. If I learned it, I want to turn around and teach it because the teacher teaches what she needs to learn. And I've learned that. So, hey, that's why I'm also teaching a seminar on forgiveness, okay? Because who doesn't need to imbibe that more on the very profound and deep spiritual, soul transforming level, right? So anyway, my friend Kay calls me, this is many years ago, and says, Ginger, she's from Alabama, says, Ginger, honey, I'm taking a class. She said, I'm trying to get more spiritual. She goes, but honey, they keep talking about God and Jesus and everything. Honey, she said, I'm so uncomfortable. She said, I just call him Big Sweetie. You think there's any problem with that? And I belly laughed. And I have told every class just about so far for all these years, that because it's so precious and it makes the point. Do you think that there's any chance that our loving Father, that God would have an issue with being called Big Sweetie? I don't think so. So, I have a question for you. And maybe you have this question for your client. Think about this profoundly. Do you believe that God will forgive you for everything and anything that you've ever done? Really, be with that. Some of you, that's an easy question of like, of course. Some say, yeah, well, not that one thing. No, do you know that? Okay, so you profoundly know that the answer is yes. That it doesn't, it's not that it doesn't matter, it's just that there's nothing that you cannot be or will not be forgiven for if you're truly sorry. So, another great question. So if you believe that God forgives you for everything, can you still justify withholding forgiveness from anyone or anything or any Circumstance. You know, one of the things that I didn't put in the PowerPoint, but I want to interject right here, is the book Love Without End, Jesus Speaks by Glenda Green, where she had a 4-month visitation with Jesus many, many years ago, back in 1998. And she was a famous portrait artist, and on Christmas Eve of 1998, I think her house burned down along with a lot of her paintings, her artwork. And on Christmas Day, they were sleeping at, I think it was her mother's house, and her husband had a dream that she was going to paint a portrait of Jesus. And he told her, and she said, "Over my artistic dead body," something like that. Like, no, 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 I'm a serious artist. I'm not doing that. But anyway, over the next 4 months or so, I mean, after a couple of years of her husband reminding her and her continuing to say, "That's not happening," she finally said one day to him, "Well, I tell you what, if he comes for a sitting, I'll paint him." So next day, shows up in physical form in her studio, when, you know, and many, 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 many thousands of people have reported having different visitations with Jesus and angels and other great beings. And so, you know, I think it's becoming a lot more commonplace these days for us to believe that that actually happened, because it did. And she has a whole book, Love Without End, that she took notes from the 4 months of visitations. One of the things that Jesus said that was the most impressive for me was, and I am paraphrasing, by the way, was he said, you know, she was talking to him about this issue of forgiveness. And she said to him, you know, she asked him, you know, why we couldn't, or something about forgiveness. And he said that how important forgiveness is, but that when we can't forgive someone, usually what's stuck is that we don't understand what that person was going through at the time that they so offended or hurt you. And that's what we were being called to do, is to try to understand what they were going through. Not that they wouldn't understand what we were going through, but what are they going through? What were they going through? And this will help us to forgive. You know, I remember when I was in my early 30s, when I first met my teacher, Hannah Kroger, we were, and I was hosting her to come and teach wherever I was living or whatever at the time. And I remember going to this little Unity Church, and I really wanted to go to the Unity Church since I had just moved to the town, just so I could kind of get in with them to have a place to host Hannah do seminar. And so I went to this Child Within workshop after the church service, and I wasn't interested at all in any kind of child within anything. I didn't believe I really had a child within. I needed the location for my Hannah seminar. But anyway, I pretended to go through this, you know, the exercises of this child within thing, waiting for it to get over so I could finally, you know, ask them about using the facility. And but I kind of thought it was a little, you know, kind of weird little exercise that they were going to have us go through. But for some reason, I went home and did the exercise myself. And at the time, you know, the instructions were that you go back to a time in your life and you take the little child by the hand, basically, and you confront the person that you have the issue with, and see, you know, what that person's going to say back. And I went through this process, and it was actually extraordinary what happened, because it became so real for me. And the fact is that even though I had a wonderful childhood and amazingly enlightened parents, etc., I'm from a very large family. There were 18 children in my family, and there are 18 children, and I am the 9th of the 18. And so my father worked a lot. And the way that I had a lot of contact with my father was playing sports, which was cool. But the little 6-year-old girl who was in this little process, the little 6-year-old Ginger, in the process was going up to confront Daddy about, why didn't he hold her more? I could have used that kind of attention. And when he came in and he sat down, and I realized in this process where I'm walking over in my meditation to take my little child to say, why didn't you hold me more? I realized, oh my goodness, he was the age that I was at this moment, about 36 years old, doing this exercise. So a little girl goes up and says, Daddy, why didn't you hold me more? He said, I didn't hold you. I didn't know I didn't hold you. He said, we had a lot of kids and I worked all the time and I was so busy, but I was so worried all the time about my ability to support the family, and I was exhausted, and it was all of a sudden that the little girl was getting, and the adult Ginger was getting the perspective of, oh my goodness, here I was, 36 years old. I had 2 dogs and I thought I was busy. At this time, he was 36 years old. He had about 15 kids and who we all loved. And like I said, we had a wonderful family, but there is a human element that you are absolutely exhausted and worried and whatever about being able to provide. And we're not having that conversation about, well, they should not have kids. They loved kids and they loved each other. So, so in the process, my father says to the little girl, the little me, the little Ginger, well, I'll hold you right now. And the little girl jumps up on his lap. They're hugging and everything. And I'm witnessing this. It was one of the most powerful things that ever happened with me. And and I can't even remember the minister who it was. I think her name was Marge, that led this seminar that I didn't really pay, this little workshop that I really didn't pay too much attention to until that happened. And I was able to see the power of forgiveness then, and what Jesus was talking about in Glenda Green's book, that to understand where that other person was in their life when they, offended you or hurt your feelings or hurt you or something. And once I had the understanding of that, it just released so much. It wasn't anything personal, and I had so much more space for the humanity and the dignity and the love of my own father. It made his love more available to me. So I didn't put that as in the PowerPoint, but now that I remember to do it, I wanted to share that. Now that I remembered that story, I just want to share that with you. So these are the energies that we're going to be working with, the stressors. In biofeedback, we have to talk about the stress associated with all these different conditions. Because unless we're a psychotherapist or some licensed medical professional that can do counseling or whatever in the session, we have to keep our session to dealing with the stressors associated with the different emotional conditions or the stressors associated with a physical condition, etc. So these are the different stressors that we're going to be dealing with when we are working with a person trying to get well and butting up against or confronting this issue of forgiveness. Instead of working on the problem, we're not going to work on their problem. We're going to focus on creating a healing environment. Okay, we're going to work on a healing environment. We're working on the field. We're working on make the feel-good environment, the connection between the heart and the head. And you're going to understand what I mean in just a minute, okay? Some of you may already, but anyway. And we're going to work on not just the environment and in the field here, but working on bringing the energy up through the energy centers and all the way to where physiologically we're going to have a flood or a release of the chemicals in the body so that consciousness is open and expanded, and we're having an experience of oneness and not being or focusing on being this human beings, stuck or in this body, but being connected to all that is. And that's when we get the biggest release of stuck energies, because it becomes no longer worth it to us to hold on to these past hurts or traumas. Now, pretty soon I'm going to be coming up and actually reading, but you'll see it on the screen, a talk or parts of a talk from Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, and it's on forgiveness. Now, as a teacher, I am also the eternal student, and I'm always studying somebody or something to do with health, healing, wholeness, consciousness, etc. Right now, I am just full bore studying Dr. Dispenza's work. And I think he's one of the most important teachers of our time. And I have had the great good fortune of having some amazing teachers, and also teaching alongside some of what I think are the best teachers, who are the best teachers in the world. So we're going to be working, we're going to do the regular loading, and you'll see this in part 2, the loading of our client. We're still going to do the calibration, the testing, and all that. We're going to look at the aura. We're going to clear, the aura and the information field in the system. And now we're going to work in the spinal panel, the scalar panel, NLP. We're going to look at the neurotransmitters. We're going to, do some work in the brain and time messages, etc. That's how I would work with the energies of non-forgiveness with a client who came for biofeedback, and we were going to work on these stressors. With you, you may have a whole different way to work with these stressors, but I'm just going to show you my way. One thing for sure is we're not going to revisit the trauma. We're not going back to reopen the wound and talk too much about the trauma. We can say, well, this is the incident that happened, but we're not going to dig into it. We're not psychotherapists, we're not psychologists, whatever. You leave that to them. But if we study the chemistry of the brain, going to pick that wound back open is not going to help us heal. It's not, it's not, as far as your brain chemistry, it's not getting you where you want in the brain chemistry. You leave that to the people, the medical professionals, that's their business, okay? That's not what we're doing. As a biofeedback practitioner, you need to know it doesn't help the brain by reopening the trauma, okay? It doesn't help the brain deal with completing the trauma by going to revisit it. That's what I mean. Okay, so here it is. Now I know you can read this yourself, but I am going to read it because there are some people joining us or listening to this that are just listening and not actually seeing the screen. So this is from Dr. Dispenza, and I get all of his work off YouTube. But he's got books and all kind of things, and you can subscribe to his channel, his website, and take courses and all of that. So far, I'm just having a steady diet of hundreds or maybe 1,000 hours of studying just what's free out there on the internet, and then I'm planning to go see him also. So here's what he says. Somebody asked him about the neurophysiology of forgiveness, and here's how he answered. So neurophysiology, we're talking about the, what's happening in the brain, right? He said, think about frozen circuits. Frozen circuits are hardwired circuits. The more profound the insult to the person that is connected to a strong emotion, the more the brain freezes circuitry. The more we think about the experience, the more we fire and wire the circuits of the brain. And the more we remember the event, the more we produce the emotions that are associated with it. And we're conditioning the brain and the body further into the past. We don't want to be in the past, all right? We don't want to be in the past. We want to be in the present and thinking about a great future. That's my words right there. So, and you keep doing, he says, so, and you keep doing enough time, and it's no longer conscious that you're holding this grudge. It's no longer conscious that you're stuck. Now you're seeing everybody through the lens of that experience, and everybody's the betrayer. Everybody can't be trusted. Everybody's the same person. You're overlaying the memory of your experience into reality. You're not seeing it the way it is. You're seeing that person wearing the mask of the last person. That's the lens that we're perceiving reality. And so then anything in your life that comes remotely close to it based on your limited perception triggers the emotion and the network, and you're stuck. There you are, and you're back in the past, and you're acting like when it happened. You're sitting and doing the work, and you're moving up the energy up those centers. So he's talking about now so now we know that we don't want to do that, right? So now we're going to go into these meditations, and he's got these great meditations where he's talking you through this disconnecting and associating with the physical form and the trauma and everything, and getting you into the space of experiencing oneness. And the first time I did this, I had just come out of I had recently moved, so my backyard was just like a dirt pile. So I had just come out of doing a lot of work in the backyard, and I was sweaty and hot, and I walked into my basement. It's walk-in basement, and I sat down, and it was kind of dark, not too dark, but cool in there, and I just put on a 18-minute meditation that he had on the website, and I had the most profound experience of oneness. I saw, just him talking me through the meditation, and what I saw was as soon as I was nobody, no thing, nothing, whatever he is going to talk you through, I saw my energy body. I saw the back of my spine like it was a zipper that was unzipped. The skin was peeled back. I saw all of the energy centers, and then I saw the hands of God. I saw Jesus himself, and I saw this, and I experienced oneness. That's how powerful his work is. And I believe too, I've been doing so much personal work that, the teacher appears when the student is ready. That's somebody's famous quote. I don't remember who. And so apparently I was ready and remain ready. And again, as I said earlier, I believe on this webinar, that the teacher teaches what she needs to learn. And so this is my time to fully understand the process of forgiving and the power of forgiving and the power and process of being forgiven. Okay, so he says you're sitting and you're doing the work and you're moving energy up these centers and you're releasing the life force into your brain and you're blessing those centers and taking a scoop and moving it all the way up and releasing it all the way up into the field, and you're opening the channel. You're unfolding as the energy is going to move, and the energy is going to move. So when this is happening, the energy is going to move to the state where you're experiencing, that's my words, that it's nobody, you're nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, no time, and the identity and the personality is gone. That is certainly what I experienced that very first time. It's going to follow the path up the body, passing through all the energy centers. You're opening your heart, and when it gets to your heart, it's going to make its way all the way up. And when you feel love and compassion, when you feel true kindness and care, it's hard to hold a grudge. Thank you, God. Those are my words now. So from a quantum physics point of view, you have that person always in the back of your mind. He's talking about when you're not forgiving, right? So from a quantum perspective, and my little film is right blocking some of my words here, so I can't see it, so I'll be paraphrasing. But from a quantum perspective, it says you're holding yourself hostage because of that person, and you're holding that person hostage because of that experience. And so you have you're actually energetically connected to them through that experience. So when we finally forgive, so when you finally forgive someone, it's because there's been a strong change in your emotional state. Because the emotion is what is keeping you energetically bound to them. Or it may be a group of people or to more than one person. So that once you start lowering the volume to that emotion and the body starts liberating energy and you're calling your energy back to you, okay, because the lower the volume of the emotion, the less you're going to pay attention to that person. There comes a moment, and this is what I love and appreciate and needed so much. There comes a moment when there's a snap. It's like that. It's a release. The energy's broken. And once it's broken, all of a sudden, you free yourself and you free them. Forgiveness from a quantum perspective and the neurophysiological perspective is taking your attention off them. And when you start getting happy with yourself and you start feeling those elevated emotions, you wouldn't trade that for the grudge you're holding on to, because this feels too good. Once the heart opens and you start having energy in the centers and it starts releasing 1,300 to 1,400 different chemicals that begin to restore and regenerate the body, and the body starts getting a lift of energy. Once it makes it here, now you're going to see that the track sending the energy to the brain, the heart acts as an amplifier to boost the brain. And once the energy starts making its way into the brain, and once the heart starts to open, then you have oxytocin levels rise. And once you start feeling more oxytocin, you feel more love. You feel more love, then you feel the grudge. And that's when you think, why would I want to, not forgive them or hold on to that feeling for that person? Why would I want to do that? My words here, this feels too good. So I just love Dr. Dispenza's work. So he goes on to say, you don't have to try to do it. It's just a side effect of your personal transformation. Oxytocin then, when it's released, rushes right into the amygdala. So I'll put a little picture up there. The survival center of the brain. This is really, really important. Listen to this part. Okay? And the first thing it does is it fits into the same receptor site as fear, and it lowers the volume to fear and anxiety. It shuts the lights out for aggression and anger and hostility, and it cools the circuits off from suffering and pain. That's why it's so important. Those are my words again. All right. And the only thing you can feel is love for life, and that's when you're free. Freedom. That's what we're going for. So thank you, Dr. Dispenza, for that beautiful talk. So now it's back to me, Ginger. And so here's my words to you and to me, to us. As a biofeedback practitioner, you can use your understanding of what worked for you in this presentation to figure out how you would incorporate this into your session when you're working with someone who is stuck with the stress of unforgiveness. But remember, them get into the higher state where there's a release of the oxytocin and all the other 1,300 chemicals occurs, and the energy has moved up through the center. Okay, the release of energy and the energy going through the heart to the brain, that's when the healing occurs. It's not revisiting the emotion. It's flooding the system with love, and the brain with the chemicals and oxytocin, and again, working on the environment and the state. Okay, so it's not the revisiting of the trauma. It is the release, the connection to all that is, the oneness, the letting go, the opening. Hannah Kroger used to tell us that we connected to God, to our source, through our crown chakra, so the energy center up here at the top of our head. And I remember seeing a photograph of my father at one of my sister's weddings, and you could see the funnel of light coming in his crown, the top of his head. And as that energy comes in and just activates, all of our energy centers, and is, that great light is what is feeding us. We got to be connected to that source. So in Dr. Dispenza's work, he's absolutely training us how to get into that state. And there are many ways to get into that state. Many people have mystical experiences. Some have it while they're running, jogging, making love. There's all kinds of ways to get into this state, but to actually consciously practice getting there in a way that we can connect and experience that oneness. Well, the brain's firing, and things are releasing, bodies are healing. There are many, many miracles being reported as we humans are learning more consciously to get into this state, and the more we can stay in this state. So that's it for part one. Here's my contact information on the screen. Energyevents.us is our website. You can call or text us. And for more information, or to find out where there might be a practitioner, if we know of a practitioner closer to you, then we'll let you know, or how to get these different products. But if you like the video, then please give us a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, so we'll keep putting out information, webinars, interviews, etc. Our passion is to help the world be a better place by supporting things, in my language, for above the line living. So to all of you all, if I have ever done anything that has offended you and that I need to be forgiven, please forgive me. I didn't mean it. Okay? And if I need to forgive you for anything, I'm telling you right now, you're forgiven, and God forgives all of us. It's not the easiest thing in the world to be a human being. Human life is sometimes really challenging, but do what you can to make the world a better place by forgiving yourself and each other.